გაუმარჯოს დამოუკიდებელ საქართველოს. არავდეს ერთი.
On the 9th of April 1991, Georgia gained its independence. This happened a year after the Soviet military killed 16 people at an anti-Soviet demonstration. Now Georgia is protesting again. This time again the attempts of the authorities to turn the country toward the Kremlin and reject any European perspectives. At the very beginning of its independence, Georgia in fact lost two regions, Ossetia and Abkhazia. Before that, when the USSR was collapsing, the ruling elite of the Soviet Union supported separatist sentiments in the region of Georgia, which resulted in confrontation in 1992-1993. With the participation of Russian mercenaries, the separatists captured most of Abkhazia and South Ossetia. They were unrecognized republics that were governed by the Kremlin. First decade of Georgia's independence ended in the Rose Revolution. Georgians took to the streets protesting against the government's current policy and attempts to falsify parliamentary elections. Eduard Shevardnadze, then the president of Georgia, tried to maintain his power against the background of failed economical policy and massive corruption among local officials. The protest ended in the re-election of both the parliament and the president. Mikhail Saakashvili and the United National Movement founded by him came to power for almost 10 years. The new government immediately prioritized the liberalization of the economy and fighting corruption. Mass privatization of state assets was carried out. The number of permit procedures were reduced, university entrance exams were abolished, and the independent external evaluation was introduced. The national police and judicial system were completely reformed. Thanks to the reform, Georgia regularly took leading place in the Doing Business rating and demonstrated rapid progress in the fighting against corruption. However, there was one important problem. The reforms were based on the political will of the authorities rather than changing the entire system to make it capable of working in different conditions. This gave a quick result, but did not contribute to the developing strong institutions and a system of checks and balances. When the authorities make decisions against the people's will, the residue of dissatisfaction accumulates over the years. And in 2012, at the next parliamentary elections, more than 50% of voters supported the Georgian Dream, the newly created political party of the local oligarch Bidzina Ivanishvili. This was also influenced by the Russian-Georgian War of 2008, in which Tbilisi lost control over the Abkhazia and South Ossetia, and the Russia deployed military bases on these territories. All this happened with the tacit consent of key world players who simply expressed deep concern about the conflict. At the time, only Ukraine, Poland, and the Baltic countries condemned Russia's invasion, and the leaders of these countries came to Georgia to support its people. Some Georgians, remembering the traumatic experience of the recent war, voted for Georgian Dream as a party of peace. They in fact brought to power the only oligarch of Georgia who gained his capital in Russia. The newly elected government declared a course toward Europe and NATO, restoring cooperation with Russia. There was no strong opposition that could oppose such a coward retreat. The pro-Russian orientation of the Georgian authorities vividly manifested itself after the beginning of the full-scale invasion of Russia into Ukraine in 2022. Georgia refused to support Western sanctions against Moscow and, on the contrary, increased the trade with Russia. In 2023, Georgia received more than $3 billion due to trading with Russia. This is more than 10% of the country's gross domestic product. In 2022, this indicator was even higher, 14.5% of GDP. In 2021, Georgia was much less dependent on Russia. The trade between the countries gave only 6.3% of GDP. After the full-scale invasion, suspensions occurred that Georgia was helping Russia circumvent sanctions as Tbilisi increased its import from EU countries from 2 billion euros in 2021 to 3.6 billion euros in 2023. A shadow oligarch took power in the country, and such a system was unacceptable for receiving the EU membership candidate status. But precisely for the sake of Georgian society and its aspiration towards the EU, Georgia received candidate status. In contrast, the adoption of the law about foreign agents, which is word to word copied from the Russian one, cancelled the potential to start the negotiation at the EU accession. In addition, adopting such a law in Russia allowed the authorities to destroy the remnants of the free thinking in the country. In the spring of 2024, the clashes between policemen and the protesters who took the streets against this law in Georgia look very similar to the events of the Revolution of Dignity in Ukraine. The same method of intimidation and defamation of the civil society leaders were used. These people were watched. The doors of their apartments were plastered with the posters calling them enemies of the church and the state. Attempts to disrupt the voting directly in the parliament hall by the opposition deputies were unsuccessful, as was the veto by President Svida Mazorobishvili. The pro-government majority found enough number of votes to pass the law as a whole. It is still unclear whether the law of the foreign agents will be enacted before the parliamentary elections that are going to take place in Georgia in fall of this year. The government uses the adopted law for political bargaining with the EU and NATO, which are already discussing the possibility of introducing sanctions and suspending the European integration process of Georgia. Nevertheless, one thing is clear. The Georgian authorities received a powerful tool for the destruction of the dissent in the country and the usurpation of power. We have a great guest, and two Ninos will help us to understand what is happening in Georgia now and why it's so important to watching on this situation from the perspective of Ukraine or EU. So let's start from Nino Yevgenidze. She is Executive Director at Economical Policy Research Center. My first question is to you, Nino. What are the most vivid manifestations of the Georgian government's turn toward Russia? Is this a tendency that has become obvious during the last 2 years, or has it been a gradual process since 2012? Can you provide us some more details? Because from Ukrainian perspective, it's a little bit weird to see what your government is doing now, because we had the option that your government was so pro-European before.
Yeah, thank you so much, Olga, for this opportunity, and thank you so much. We really appreciate your support and the support of the Ukrainian people, because we know that you are in a worse situation rather than we are right now, because you are in a front line of fighting for freedom and democracy, not only for Ukrainians, but for all of us. And we know your pain, what you are going through, because we were in the same position in 2008. And we remember each and every country who were in support us, and we remember all our Ukrainian friends and the brothers who were standing all the time together with us and fighting together with us. And every single citizen of this country, somewhere more than 85% of the Georgian population, thinks that the war in Ukraine is their war. And as you are aware, many thousands of Georgians are fighting there because they know that it's our common fight for the against the enemy of the, not only for the Georgians or Ukrainians, but just for humanity, because the Russia is a terrorist state. And the situation why we ended here in Georgia, one of the best performers in the world with the reforms and doing all this, and very pro-European. And we stay still pro-European because the people of this country are very pro-Western, and they're doing their best to get back to the European family very soon. And we understand that what is going right now in Georgia, and one thinks that this is there's some different stuff from what is going right now in Ukraine or in Moldova, because we all know that the Russia just wants to restore the Soviet Union, and they're doing from their end everything to get us, all of us, to under their Russian orbit or Russian influence. And before the government of this country, I myself belong to the people who were believing since 2012 that this government was a very pro-Russian, because I don't know anyone in the world, the Russian oligarch who took his money from the Russia and ended somewhere with a nice the goals or to supporting any democracy or whatever. And all this backsliding, which we were facing last 12 years, it was a gradually, step by step, was we were getting on this direction. But 2 years ago, the war in Ukraine, it was kind of final crossroads for them, because I think that from the Kremlin side, it was kind of request they have to choose the side, whose side they are, And the protest started 2 years ago just on that topic, that the government, they were showing the zero support to the Ukrainian people. And for the Georgians, it was kind of unbelievable things, And that there was hundreds of thousands Georgians went to the streets. And this was the first time when so many people went to the streets, because we understand that the position of the Georgian government was some kind of a official signing of something that they're going to turn to Georgia to the Russian orbit again. And all these 2 years, all this battle, because you remember the last year they introduced this Russian law again. And it was kind of after the massive protests and the demonstrations, they withdrew the law. But we, civil society organizations, we were already expecting that they're gonna bring this law back again. And they did everything, and they were forcing the situation, and they were violating all kind of human rights or whatever in the protests, during the demonstrations. It's more than 200 people are arrested and punished. And yesterday they already adopted, day before yesterday, they already adopted this law, which is was final, the declaration from their side that they belong to the the Russian orbit now, and that every single Georgian calls them the Russian regime right now. We, the civil society organization, we signed the statement that we are not going to obey the Russian law, and we will do everything just to peacefully, you know, to get to the elections and do everything for that, to change with the democratic, like, you know, and the peaceful way, this government, and to get rid out from the like, you know, this Putin's interference in this country. Yeah, I'm gonna stop here, and I'm sure the Nino, yet another Nino, has a lot of to add to this introductory speech. Thank you.
Thank you, Nino. And it's very good to have this background, because sometimes hybrid war is looking like that. So we need to learn the lessons before this situation will ongoing till the, you know, more hot stage. And I have another distinguished guest, another Nino Dolidze. She is Executive Director of International Society for Fair Elections and Democracy. And Nino, when adopting the law, the authorities used a range of pressure tools against their opponents. And I heard already that you was under the pressure, and someone unofficially tried to destroy your mental health somehow, because you had a case already that someone from authority, I believe so, organized campaigning against you personally. And your organization, it's for our audience, is like Opora in Ukraine. You have a professional background with political and electoral processes, and your role next autumn will be very important in Georgia. Tell us a little bit more about this campaigning against you personally, and how it looks like now against other civil society or political actors, representatives.
Hello, everybody, and hello, Olga. It's really great opportunity to talk to you and the audience in Ukraine who is interested in what's happening here in Georgia. And yes, we are happy that we are a sister organization of Opora, and we do the same work, which is supporting and defending free and fair elections in our countries, that was established in 1995. And since then, we have been monitoring here elections. So yeah, discreditation of civil society organizations, and especially ISFED, I would say, has started long ago. It's not new. Before the legislation, like 3 years ago, 2 years ago, they started attacking ISFED, or like officials of ruling party has been mentioning ISFED many times. And also it has gone beyond itself as an organization, that it was personal attacks. We have seen several TV shows against me personally, like showing very attacking and discrediting stories, like that I am rich, the boss of rich NGO, or that I am not supporting my country's interests or whatever, because I am talking about the problems during elections. It has been huge campaign in social media also, targeting me and other watchdog organizations, of course, not me personally. But you know, we consider this as a part of our job. We always know that governments are not really happy with having watchdog organizations, especially those who talk about the problems during elections. And we thought that, okay, it is more or less acceptable. But yeah, this legislation and the form how they now continue attacks is, of course, I would say it's far more from only attacking social networks. They started posting like posters right like in front of our home doors, also our offices, and there are like our pictures and written that it's traitor of the country, traitor of the nation. So it's not about only social network or media, but they are showing to our neighbors, family members, with this like writing that we are traitors of the country. They have been calling to us and also our family members, like my 11-year-old daughter was also receiving these phone calls of threatening. And I believe it was done because they just wanted us to silence ourselves, not to be active against this Russian law, because these phone calls and posters were not only against us civil society leaders, but also other people who were protesting all this legislation. They also received this kind of threat. So I think on one hand, it was an attempt to threaten us in front of big protestations, but I believe that they will continue this kind of threats and maybe other forms before elections, because they know that ISFED and other watchdog organizations are looking at the problems during pre-election period as well as on election day. We are talking about all possible violations, and also we are working very hard on voter education. And informed voters are not, of course, in the interest of ruling party. That's why I believe that they will try to silence us and also use this kind of threatening methods again before elections. But we are ready. Civil society organizations here in Georgia, we said that we will never register in the registry which is against our dignity. We are representing only one country's interest, and this country is Georgia. So, of course, we will never register as foreign countries' agents, no matter what will happen. We are not going to run from this country. We will do our job, what we have planned to do, and let's see how far they will go. If they decide not to allow on the polling station organization, which is already 30 years operating in this country and defending all elections, it will be their political message and decision. And then they cannot talk about any free and fair elections, of course. So we are ready. Let's see what will be the development. But these civil society organizations are standing strong. And we also feel your support, Ukrainian and other civil. So I can continue, or I will stop here, and you can have additional questions on that.
Thank you, Nino. And the question is about one detail. Do you know what will be the punishment if you will not be registered as foreign agents at the end?
So according to the legislation, it will enter into the force right before elections. Like they have said that it will be in 2 months. In 2 months, it's already August, and official pre-election period here in Georgia starts on 26th of August because elections are on 26th of October. So, and then you have 1 month to register yourself in this registry, which we are not going to do. And also, you probably know, and just explain to the broader society, that all the time, whenever elections come, the election observers are going to the election administration to register ourselves as an election observer. So they may create us problems during registering at election administration as an election observer, or this cannot be case, but they will start monitoring, and this monitoring is under this foreign agents law, that they can start monitoring themselves, because we are not registering, but they can start monitoring and they can forcibly register us. So we still do not know what kind of problems they may create. One is not giving us accreditation for election observation, or second is that they can start monitoring, and we don't know what monitorings mean. It can be hindering our work right before elections, because, you know, we are in the process of conducting trainings, preparing thousands of observers, or also doing like statements, assessing pre-election period. And can you imagine at the same time they are starting monitoring against us, which we still do not know what it is, because legislation just says it's monitoring, but we will see it with the bylaws, what will be the specifics. So we cannot exclude anything. Let's see how far government wants to go. And yeah, let's see if they do not allow us to be represented on the polling stations. Again, it will be a big political decision from their side, but not wise and not smart decision, because everybody here in this country know that observation of election is crucial to trust the results.
And my next question is to Nino Yevgenidze. So I have to ask you about the broader political landscape in Georgia across this topic and this decision which we are made by your parliament. First of all, what is the basis for supporting this policy by the part of the political community that voted for this decision against EU integration? And is there a split within the society, and can it turn into a clash inside the country? Because we need to understand from abroad what is the political position, not just majority in parliament, but broader. Are any actors who can be powerful to fight against this track, which already looks like pro-Russian? And what about society? Is inside the society potential support of the government decision on this way? Or because we see huge manifestations, and from abroad, it's not so easy to understand why society is not so supportive of this track, but politicians still adopting these decisions.
This is again underlining that the state is captured by the Russian oligarch Bidzina Ivanishvili, who runs this country. And you saw that there was like a 52 days of uninterrupted, like never ended, like a protest of the people every single day. And the hundreds of thousands of people were coming every single day to the streets to protest this Russian law. And everybody understands that somewhere 2 weeks ago, there was a official, like a statement from the Russian oligarch Bidzina Ivanishvili, which it was perceived as like an official statement that they're shifting the foreign policy of this country, and they're not anymore the pro-European. And we can say now that they are like a very pro-Russian and a very pro-authoritarian, because the first time in the history of Georgia, despite the fact that all civilized world, including the United States, Europe, Ukraine, or whoever, they are like they're asking the suggesting Georgian government not to change or not to dismiss the will of the Georgian people and to withdraw this law, and they were still going to adopt this law. And it's again underlines their desire not to be any more pro-Western, because the prime minister went to the the funeral of the Iranian leader, and he was standing together with the Hezbollah, Hamas, and the Taliban together, it's unbelievable. It's never ever happened before, in a history of the Georgians. And yesterday also, if you follow the events in Georgia, a few years ago, the Bidzina Ivanishvili and Georgian Dream government, they stopped the building of the Anaklia deep sea port, which was kind of like a connection between the West and the East, and it was kind of like the window of opportunity to connect the Europe with the some rest of the world, and also to for ourselves to build the resilience and the economic security of this country. And Bidzina Ivanishvili, the Russian oligarch who runs this country, said that he doesn't want to see any Western investment in this port. And yesterday they finally granted this, the procurement to building and to operating in this port for Chinese company who is sanctioned from the United States. This is again kind of the statement from their side that they don't care about any democratic values or any rule of law, or they don't belong anymore to the Western, the community, and they were doing their best to bring Georgia to the Russian orbit. But civil society organizations and the society itself, they are so determined. Everybody is ready to fight for our the freedom and independence, because it's not kind of then you can see the unity of the society, from the Gen Z generation to the elderly people. They are standing all together in the streets but they're protesting this Russian law. And we understand the the threats which are coming from the Russian side as well. And we are from our end doing our best, to make it peacefully, to get rid out from this, the Russian style regime here in this country. This is a reality what we have right now, but the civil society organization together with the political parties and so we're doing our best, you know, to make it a really peaceful way. Otherwise, the tension is very high and the situation is really very, very critical, you know, because we never ever faced before this kind of like, you know, the kind of selling your own country. And this 84 like members of the parliament who voted for this law, they are kind of traders for us and for the Georgian people who made this decision to kill the future European future of this country. You know, it's from their like, you know, the perspective, but of course we are not agree with this, and we will fight till the victory.
And one more question to you, Nino. First of all, what's about support of those who visited Georgia during this period, like ministers of foreign affairs? I saw so many actors which was mobilized by you personally. And I believe that it had to shake somehow the Georgian government now, because they understood that it's not so easy to sell this story that they are pro-European, but so many Europeans are against these changes to legislation. So what about that, and how these worlds are looking together? Because, you know, government can provide everything. They are not dependent, but not so independent media. But what about this picture of strong support of the society which are fighting against these changes to legislation?
Be honest, they don't care about what the Western societies or the ministers think about this. Even the last week visit of the foreign ministers from Baltic countries and Iceland, like, you know, they after that they accused me, the chairman of the parliament, that I brought the like foreign ministers here in this country, guided them to the stage and insisting them to go to the stage and to address the Georgian people. And I was kind of like, you know, they involved in a, you know, the destroying or sabotaging my own country. And even I was accused to giving the interview BBC. And, you know, we were talking about what kind of impact this going to have to the economic situation in the country. And they were accusing us that we were sabotaging the London Stock Exchange. Can you imagine, where the Georgian companies share went down, and they lost somewhere 2 billion dollars. And this kind of crazy madness they're saying, and they're posting, and it's their everyday, they're not hiding this from anyone, you know. And at least at least we're happy that it's not anymore only civil society organizations, the kind of activity now, because everybody who were visiting the Georgia, they understand that this government, they are totally they're using this Russian style hybrid warfare instruments against their own people, and to also undermining the democracy in the world, and all those countries who are fighting the global fight with the Russian Empire. They were saying that we all Georgian civil society organizations, together with our Western partners who supports the Georgia and the Georgian people itself, and I'm pretty sure you saw all statements from from the presidents or chairmen or MPs or from all around the world, who were supporting the Georgian people. And they were saying that we are all members of the Global War Party, who wants to drag Georgia to the war. You know, I mean, this kind of crazy stuff, which is totally part of the Russian disinformation campaigns. They are the feeding the population itself, which looks like that doesn't work here in this country, at least, because the hundreds of thousands Georgians are still in the streets, and we continue this protest, and the June 2nd is going to be yet another big rally, the protest in the streets, which is organized by the Georgian Civil Society Organization together with the Georgian artists and the performers, and so to support those people who are in a prison, and they need our support to to get rid out from the prisons very soon as possible.
Okay, thank you. And Nino Dolidze, the next question is to you. So can you tell us a little bit more about potential sanctions against government and those who push this decision against EU standards and against perspective to be a part of EU? We heard many statements from different partners, but statements is not enough as a tool. Yeah, sometimes we need sanctions to highlight how serious is the situation. So what do you think about potential sanctions against politicians or government in Georgia from Western countries? And what about sanctions from society? Next time during electoral process, will this government has so big support as before?
Really, Georgian government has been doing so many backsliding things, whether it was democratic backsliding or our Western trajectory backsliding, that finally our Western partners understood that only statements and concerns are not enough. I understand that our international partners, whether it is European Union or United States, which is our strategic partner, has been waiting for a long time, because they still consider that this government was doing all this backsliding because of maintaining the power. But on April 29th, when Bidzina Ivanishvili, former and informal, I would say, governor of a ruling party, came on the stage, he was very clear about his attitudes and his goals related to Western integration. Yeah, he openly said that West was creating for him problem, and as he said, for the country. So, and he was very, very openly anti-Western, and he said, what are the plans? Like, on one hand, changing the trajectory, and also he said that they would start repressions after the elections to the collective United National Movement, UNM. And these guys call collective UNM anybody who has different opinion, whether it's any political party, civil society organization, I don't know, academia, even ambassadors of foreign countries, etc. So now I think our Western partners understood that these guys are not doing it only for the maintaining the power, but it's also change of the foreign policy trajectory. And they openly started mentioning sanctions beyond only statements of concern. So we have heard from two sides. One is of United States, and in United States we heard both from the State Department as well as from the Congress that they want to initiate sanctions against those who undermine democracy in the country. And they have mentioned, on one hand, travel bans, but also financial sanctions. For example, travel bans may be on those who signed this legislation and their family members, but also financial sanctions can be on a smaller group, but those who really are making decisions, and these decisions are against Georgia's future. So one we are expecting from the United States, and they openly said, State Department said that there is a list. And there is another, it's so-called Megobari Act in the Congress, which is Megobari's friend in Georgian language, which is saying that on one hand, they will initiate sanctions, but also this act considers huge support to Georgia, whether it was economic, democratic support, and also visa liberalization for Georgians if Georgian government doesn't continue this anti-democratic way and goes back to the right trajectory. So this Begobari Act has two types of dimensions. One is negative and another is positive in case we decide, government decides to be democratic, but we don't think that this is the case. The other is the European Union, and European Union is more bureaucratic and slow in their decisions, of course, considered the United States, but they have also, some of the member states have also mentioned, for example, both travel bans or limits on assistance of Georgia, and some of them even has mentioned visa-free, to consider and look again to the visa-free regime the Georgians have in European Union countries. In this case, we civil society organizations say that whatever it will be from European Union or United States, it should not be against Georgian people, because Georgian people are so brave, standing outside and physically defending country's future. They deserve everything, every support, people of this country. So whatever it will be, sanctions, it should not be against people. But of course, if it will be against those people who are undermining our country's future, who are acting against Georgia's constitution, of course, they can have this, and it will be even better because it will support people who are standing outside. Let's see what will be the final decisions and final actions. We consider that the United States will be faster, of course, than compared to European Union, but we are expecting that these actions will happen because, red lines are crossed, unfortunately, from the ruling party and government of Georgia. And people are also waiting. People outside who are standing, they are also waiting to these sanctions. You can see many people writing on the United States Embassy or Twitter or whatever, that sanctions should come on Bidzina Ivanishvili and also others who are undermining democracy. We are waiting. Very important elections are coming, as you mentioned. We don't know what will be the final decision of Georgian people, but I believe a ruling party lost many votes during this process. Even many of our partners have been asking why these guys just started initiating this legislation right now, because they could have even more elections, because some say that opposition could not be that much strong, or they could do some, pre-election administrative use of administrative resources, spending too much money, and they still could have some chances. So question is why they started this now, because they really lost many votes. I saw people, Georgian Dream supporters, standing outside on these rallies, and many people from the public sectors openly said that they do not support this legislation. So currently, I don't believe that they have a majority according to the mood what we are seeing, and also polls what we have seen, public opinion polls. It was not done right now, but even previously, you cannot see that any political party here in this country has majority. So it will be difficult elections for Georgian Dream, of course. In free and fair elections, I don't believe that they can get majority. So maybe that is the reason that this legislation was right before elections, because if you want to do something on the polling station or want to manipulate elections, you don't need observers there. So it's, time-wise, it can answer these questions. And we will try everything to defend Georgian voters' rights, to defend each and every vote, how much we can. We will coordinate with other civil society organizations, and we will do huge voter education campaigns to go to each and every city and even village to explain people. Because unfortunately, you know how ruling parties work. They are threatening public servants, threatening those who are on social assistances, not to lose this assistance or not to lose jobs. We have seen this kind of schemes. So now it is time to explain to every voter that they should not be afraid and make decisions how they want. And here we are to defend their rights. Mm-hmm. This is very shortly about elections, and then let's see.
One question about elections. But Nino Yevgenidze, can I ask you about the parliament? So not so far away from this period, the Georgian parliament overcame the veto of the law which allows those who bring money from offshores to Georgia to receive tax benefits. Do Georgians see this as obvious manifestation of political corruption? Because we know, even in Ukraine, who has money abroad from Georgia and who is playing games for this topic. So what about that? Do you have a discussion about such type of political corruption in Georgia now?
Because, like, you know, this offshore law also was introduced together with the Russian law for this kind of so-called foreign agent law, all together in a, like, you know, the combination. It's again, if you look to the global picture, it's again all about to bring Georgia to the, you know, the kind of to create some kind of financial heaven for the Russian oligarchs, in my understanding, you know, to bring their money, especially when they are all sanctioned all around the world. And they are creating some kind of money laundering hub here in this country within the situation of the war in Ukraine and to avoid the sanction. And he himself, the Bidzina Ivanishvili, to secure his money as well. I'm pretty sure both this introduction of both of this law in the same time was related to each other, because in my understanding, this authoritarian world together with the Vladimir Putin, they are preparing themselves for the final kind of fight with the Ukraine and the rest of the civilized world. And they need some kind of this kind of countries with them, who is going to be some kind of satellite, like, you know, and their proxies to implement their so-called final goals. But I'm pretty sure that, you know, that the democracy and the freedom will prevail, and we will, you know, answer all this kind of, like, you know, the tax and the, you know, the Russian style mafia, like oligarchs who are undermining the democracy everywhere, and especially in Georgia, and helping the Russians to avoid the sanctions against the war in Ukraine. I'm pretty sure we will, like, you know, win this war against them, because, I mean, the society itself, you know, that stands together, despite the fact that the people were beaten or punished or arrested. The next day, all these people were coming to the demonstrations, you know. This is which differs us from the Russians, you know. No one is going to leave this country, and because we believe that it's our fight. No one going to fight on behalf of us, you know, and we will do our best together with our international partners. And Nino mentioned, like, you know, correctly about the sanctions, which is coming from the United States. And as I know, it's going to be in this week or latest in the beginning of the next week. And we will see how this corrupt system is going to prevail with the sanctioning themselves and their family members, and they can travel or having any businesses in the West. And if you look to the a list of these MPs who voted for the this Russian law, all their family members, they are living in a Western the different countries. They are enjoying the benefits of the West. Their kids are studying there and enjoying their life. Most of them, they were having the citizenship of the United States or the Europe. And let us wait and see how they're gonna benefit from this, the making this kind of decisions, being the traders of their own country. And I'm pretty sure we all together we will win this battle here in Georgia, and after that in Ukraine for sure.
Thank you, Nino, for your solidarity, and of course the bigger solidarity from our side. You see the Georgian flag, we kidnapped it from Georgian restaurant in Kyiv. But the Georgian cuisine is very, very popular in Ukraine. You know about that. So we have solidarity everywhere. And my last question to Nino Dolidze will be, of course, about elections. It will be the first time when you will have proportional system. In some of these political systems, sometimes majoritarian system looking as more perspective and better for the use and administrative resource. At the same time, if you will not be presented as active actor on the polling stations, of course, it may be used for organizing falsification and fraud and so on and so forth. So as I saw the survey that more than 70% of Georgian at the end of last year wanted to change the government. So how do you see not just your activity during next stage of this big picture of political changes in Georgia, but how do you see the next elections will be organized with proportional system, and do you see that there are enough actors like political parties who can participate at the highest level and fight for having free and fair elections from their perspective, not just from civil society side?
Yes, so we have been fighting for proportional system for a long time in Georgia because, you know, we had mixed system, proportional and majoritarian together, and majoritarian seats were always won by the ruling parties. This party, previous party, and even previous administrations. So it's easier for ruling parties to win majoritarian systems because usually they have local businessmen or kind of small oligarchs in the regions who are really giving money or helping to the local people, and it's easier for them, you know, to win elections on the ground. So that's why we were considering that no matter whatever ruling parties we are receiving in proportional, this was adding up, and that's why they had majoritarians. So right now with the proportional system, ruling party of course has bigger problems, because they have to win 50% plus in order to have majority. And if you look at the previous results last elections, it was not 50%, for example, in proportional system. So it is on one hand creating for them problem. Another challenge is a little bit for smaller parties that we have 5% threshold. And if you look at the Georgian political parties, many of them do not have more than 5%. They have 2%, 3%, some of them 4%. But with Georgian legislation, if you do not get 5 or more, you're just losing your votes because mandates will be distributed only for those who overcome. So in this case, I am always saying that part of the elections is math. So I think that opposition political parties, if they want to be successful, they should do calculations how they are overcoming 5% threshold, and also to make some of the unities to overcome, but I don't know still what they are planning to do. We have heard that many of them are still thinking that they may unite, but we still do not have exact picture. Because everybody was really engaged with the protests about this Russian law, and now people started to focus more on elections. So political parties have opportunity if they make wise unities, that they have to look at the polls, how are people voting, what is voters' behavior, who is supporting whose voters, etc., and then make decisions. But you know, it's up to them, and we cannot really make recommendations as an observer organization. So we do not do any recommendations. We are just saying that if they should respond to voters' interest, which we are defending. It's still 5 months left, so there is still time to make some unities. There is no electoral blocks allowed. It's prohibited, and it's also making problem because some parties could have united and then entered in election as an electoral bloc, which is easier for them, you know, because they are parties, but after that they can continue their life as a separate parties. But right now, if they decide, they just need to merge or unite under one party to become one unity. And I think they are discussing and considering some of the options, and let's see what will be. But from our perspective, what we are looking as an observer organization is that we have seen huge schemes of manipulation in pre-election period. we were given with our partner organization documents from the whistleblower 2 years ago, and this is whistleblower who was deputy head of state security services. He's not like usual guy, and he gave us information how state institutions are involved in favor of ruling party during elections. Whether it's Ministry of Education, for example, and they are giving instructions to school directors how to behave during elections. And we all know that here in Georgia, polling stations are at schools. So engagement of educational system in favor of ruling party is huge administrative resources for them. Also, we have seen in these documents how, for example, penalties and fines were canceled for those who were mobilizing voters for the ruling party. Or, for example, how penitentiary system was used and in favor of ruling party and Ministry of Justice. So this is the scheme, and that's why our focus now will be to again see and open eye of the society how these schemes are working, and again to ensure that people who are under threat, intimidation, or pressure, they should not be afraid, because they should vote freely and nobody can understand who they voted for. Like, issue of vote secrecy is a big problem here because people are threatened in rural areas. There is smaller villages and state security services work. We will do that in pre-election period, and on election day, we will look how the procedures go. It will be very much important to observe also election day because we have new electronic technologies during these elections, which is totally new electoral day procedures. And Olga, you will understand me that it's quite big novelty and there are so many questions. So it will be crucial to be on the polling station. But if we are not allowed again, then it will be very difficult for us to talk about fair elections and to talk about election result trust. In this case, then political parties, opposition also, and the representatives should be brave and observe and see what's happening. But of course, independent, impartial observers are the best observers in order to give true picture to the society outside. We will wait the developments. As said, we are going with the plan what we had. We are not afraid. We will have pre-election observation. We are planning to have more than 1,000 observers on election day. Many people are calling us every single day and asking how they can observe through our mission. People are motivated. They want to be engaged. And I think that Georgian people deserve, and they will win our work to European integration and our democratic development, because this is the choice of Georgian people, and we cannot do other way.
Thank you, Nino. Thank you both of you. And I have to highlight that we had these great, professional, powerful, bright women from Georgia. And you have to know that we are watching what's happening in Georgia. We feeling the same pain. We know how it looks like from inside. And I believe that Georgia has to be free from Russia for sure, because political occupation somehow it's one stage and one step from the military invasion, unfortunately. And we need to fight for your rights too, from the perspective of Europe to be a part of EU, because your nation did this choice already. So glory to Georgia. My best wishes to you, and we always together. We are very close to you for sure.
Thank you so much, Olga, for your support. And you know that everybody who is coming to Georgia and asking us how we can support the Georgia, and the answer from all Georgian civil society organizations are: first, help the Ukrainians win this war. It's gonna be our victory as well, you know. The victory of Ukraine is a victory of Georgia, and we all believe that we will prevail, and the freedom and democracy, and that will prevail, because our fight is a good fight, and we're fighting for our freedom. Thank you so much.
True fight, and we are on the right side. I also just want to say, we support Ukraine, and we believe that your victory is our victory again. And thank you for this opportunity and for your support. We are together, two countries.